Hello class, welcome to week 9 of Intro to Film. Sorry, that's the name of the class. I'm back live. If you may have noticed, the last couple weeks were pre-recorded. I was busy and out of town, so I couldn't do these recordings as I like, but hopefully the content was still helpful to you. So this week we're going to talk about kind of looking into the future of film and looking at, where are we going in terms of film technology. So this is the week in the class where I like to kind of put my little genie hat on and kind of think about what is going to happen in the future of the film. And this is something that we deal a lot with in our program here, the Video and Web Production program, because we want to prepare students for what tomorrow's opportunities are. And so we're always constantly thinking about, where are we going and how do we adapt our skills to what's going to be happening in the future. So we're going to be looking at the way that technology has influenced film in the way that we watch movies in theaters, how we watch them at home, and also how we make movies. And there's been a profound change in each of those areas. I'd say probably theaters less, but definitely more kind of our own production has changed a lot in the last 10 or 15 years. And are those changes good or for bad? I think they're good for us, and they're good for potential students who want to break into the art, but they may be bad for the existing kind of system. And they may be bad for, those interesting films that we used to like to watch that, people took chances on. They're less and less likely to make those because studios are less likely to take a chance on some movies. So some interesting things happening in terms of how films are being made. So we kind of have two centers of change for film. One is in the exhibition, the way that we watch movies, and one is in the creation, the way that we make movies. So in terms of exhibition, we have more sophisticated modes of immersion, okay? Meaning that we are trying to, one of the goals, and this is what we'll be talking about in this lecture, is filmmakers have been constantly trying to immerse their audiences more and more into their films. And that's definitely why we see kind of a trend towards 3D, bigger screens nowadays, because they want films to be more an immersive experience. In 20 years, if we have technology that makes films, almost virtual reality, I think filmmakers will want to go to that because they've always wanted to immerse their audiences within the films that they're watching. We also see new channels for viewing, and that can help probably helps more the kind of budding filmmaker because they have more opportunities to get their films out there. It used to be that, I had to kind of jump through these series of hoops to get my films to play in a theater, but now I have these other ways that people can watch my film. And it doesn't need to necessarily be released in the theater. So that's exciting in a way. And in terms of creation, we also have, we have lower cost tools for budding filmmakers. A big trend right now, and something that I've been doing a lot, is digital SLR filmmaking. So taking those cameras that we take still photographs with and making movies with them, and the quality is pretty astounding. We also see a convergence of professional and consumer technologies. The line between what is a consumer technology and what's professional technology is really, really blurring. And it may be that in 10 years we see that more blurred and we're using one and the same. And then there's also the use of more social tools to collaborate on projects. The ability for collaboration is so great with the internet now. And so we don't have to live in the same town to work on a project with someone, but we can work across the ocean from someone. So some pretty exciting centers for change happening in film. So kind of looking back historically, how has technology spurred the growth of film? And probably, we've definitely had lots of technology influencing film and filmmaking. Probably one of the biggest ones is 1927's The Jazz Singer. And this film introduced synchronous sound into a film. And this has been kind of the subject for a lot of films. My wife was just watching Singing in the Rain, which kind of talks about this issue. Or if you've seen The Artist, that's also something that comes up in that film. And that kind of really shook the way that we saw films. Before they could really explore this visual storytelling, and they were doing pretty sophisticated things. And then once synchronous sound hits, they kind of stalled for a while because they didn't know what to do with this new way of making films. But then technology adapted, and now we have kind of the wonderful types of films that we can have now. And the visual storytelling that we once had is back and increased to a certain extent. So we have the synchronous sound is one thing that's been kind of, was definitely kind of very influential in spurring on the growth of film technology. Another one is filmmakers have tried to increase the width of the screen to make films more of a spectacle, more an immersive process, and we'll talk about some different things that they've done. We've also seen a shift towards low-cost production, and low-cost distribution channels, which makes it possible for filmmakers who are unknown to have their work seen by a bigger audience. So, an historical example of kind of looking at the increasing the width of a screen to make a more immersive experience. This is kind of a case study. So kind of what was happening after World War II, a lot of people were moving to the suburbs, moving away from kind of these big population centers, and also TV was becoming a big thing. So filmmakers found that audiences were less and less likely to go to a movie theater to go see a movie because they could have that same entertainment experience at home. So filmmakers and production studios were coming up with ways that we can make an experience in the theater that you couldn't have at home. And so one of the things they did is they wanted to make the screen wider and wider. And probably one of the most kind of novel ideas that they had was this something called the Cinerama. And the Cinerama, what they did was they took three 35mm cameras and they locked them together side by side so they'd get a really wide image. And then they would edit those, and then they would project it back in the same way. Okay, so we have these three overlapping images that would then project back on the screen. And the idea is that it was supposed to give you a 146-degree viewing angle. And now, we've had other experiences, like if you've been to Disneyland, they have a 360-degree film, which doesn't really work for a lot of reasons because you can't really focus your attention on a certain thing. But the whole idea was that we wanted to create these experiences that you couldn't have at home. And there's actually a Cinerama theater in Seattle. They don't use this technique anymore, but you can kind of see how big the screen is, and it's very, very big. They kind of scaled that back, and they instead kind of went to a process called CinemaScope, which they used for a really long time, and now they use anamorphic widescreen. So now when you go to a theater, you have a really wide image, and the idea is that we want image as immersive as possible for the audience. We want to create an experience that they're not going to be able to have at their home. And we saw the same thing with surround sound. There's a big surround sound push in the 90s. And now we're seeing it now with IMAX screens and also 3D technologies. It's just this, the filmmaking industry is trying to fight with what's going on in the home. So we kind of have what I call the technological arms race. Fighting in between kind of TV and the movie. So we have sync sound giving way to widescreen movies, giving way to surround sound theaters, which gave way to IMAX theaters with really big screens, which is kind of giving its way now to 3D movies, which is kind of currently debatable whether those are going to keep on going. Now, we'll probably have some immersive experience that comes out of 3D movies, but whether or not all movies are made in 3D, that's kind of remains to be seen. I think not until we kind of get some glassless technology, that's not going to really kind of stick around as much as we want to. So, what are some of the current trends we're seeing? Definitely 3D and IMAX are the big things. And some of the other current trends that we're seeing are new ways that we can watch movies. We have new distribution channels. So, in this class, we've seen that we can watch a lot of movies through Netflix. And it gives us the convenience of watching it at home, on our laptop, at school, and we can watch the same movie at the same time or the same movie at different times using these technologies. We also have YouTube, which is producing its own content, also releasing movies. Now Netflix if you've read the news or looked at Netflix recently, they've kind of even gone into, they used to be just kind of a distribution channel, but now they're actually producing content. Amazon's doing the same thing. So they're looking for original content to produce, which is a great opportunity for budding filmmakers. So back to kind of 3D and IMAX. 3D and IMAX are facing that same problem. How do we keep the attention of audiences that's increasingly diverted by other things outside the theater? And the latest iteration is 3D and IMAX. They are seeking to create a destination experiences for audience that cannot be created at home. And but probably one of the biggest reasons that films are being made in IMAX and in 3D is that it allows a premium price on your ticket. Now, you probably thought that spending $10 just to go see a movie was well enough, enough money for seeing a movie. But, if you add $5 more on that ticket, that's a lot more money that's going to the studio. And they were really pushing 3D for a long time because they wanted that premium pricing that's been coming out of it. But I want to think about, what's your experience been watching a 3D movie? And do you feel that the industry is really moving in this direction? A lot of the stuff that I've been reading is that kind of 3D is kind of dying. My experience is I, enjoy going to watch a 3D movie, but for the most part, unless it's like a film like Avatar, I'm not going to spend the extra money to go watch a movie in 3D. Glasses make my head hurt. I have a big head, so I typically will just kind of opt out for the 2D option. So, a lot of it's kind of the give and take of the industry trying to kind of try these things out to see if it works, and then maybe pulling back if it's not working. Some other things that we see in the future of film production is just the cost of making movies and the cost of distribution has really gone down. So it allows these kind of players to kind of test out ideas without necessarily having a lot of money or a lot of support. A good example of that is the film Paranormal Activity. It was made for a budget of $15,000. They shot it in 7 days, and it went on to make $100 million at the box office. So, a filmmaker can have an idea, a small budget, they can hire a little cast, some unknown actors, and they can make something that's, actually plays out pretty spectacularly. Another example, Colin, which is a $70 zombie film that played at the Cannes Film Festival. It was kind of made through the help of a bunch of friends, and we see that as well. Now, not every film that's made like that is going to rise up to that level, but the idea is that the bar for entry is going down. And this one's kind of interesting, the Never Say Never director's cut. If you haven't seen Never Say Never, it's actually a pretty awesome film. I actually really liked it. I'm not a Justin Bieber fan, but pretty interesting film. But the interesting thing about the director's cut is that it was released a couple weeks after the regular cut of the film. And that might not be such a big deal, but it was released digitally in theaters. So theoretically, kind of giving you some background, films used to be released on a film print that were really expensive to make. But now, most films are being released through a digital file. They're being projected digitally, they're played off a digital file. So that means that I could go and make a change to my film, I could make a different cut of my film, and the next week in the theater, I could have that additional material playing in the theater. And that's kind of what this Never Say Never director's cut does. So the turnaround time for this distribution method is a lot quicker. We also have some pretty interesting things that happening in the way that we make films. We have new means of production. This camera on the left, the Red Scarlet, is made by a company called Red. And Red was developed by the former owner of Oakley, and it's pretty much if you're familiar with photography at all, it's a raw video camera. And it's really replaced big 35mm film cameras. And so now most films are being shot digitally. And the thing about this is that this camera itself is about $15,000. Now, that may seem like a lot of money to you, but actually 35mm film cameras were about $500,000. So, knowing the difference between that and this, this is actually can be in the hands of a filmmaker. This over here, this big rig, is actually a digital SLR. It's a Canon 5D Mark II it's kind of put into this big little machine that they have. And, we have films being shot on these little digital SLR cameras. So it's really blurring the distance between what's consumer and what's professional. The future in film distribution, increasingly we'll see film content that's delivered to households digitally through various means. So, right now we're seeing things through kind of traditional DVD and Blu-ray. We have on-demand through cable television. And we've had a lot of films that, play at the Sundance Film Festival. They get picked up, and then the next week they're being shown on demand. And for those films, they actually make money because they're not putting up all the upfront costs to go through a normal theatrical distribution. People are willing to pay money to see those films at home. We have Netflix instant streaming. We have Hulu and other video sites. And, we are constantly accessing media through different ways. And video is bigger than it's ever been before. And it's more portable than it's ever been before. So it's pretty promising for our students who want to get into this field, because those bars have been lowered for them getting into creating that content. Now, the last thing I'll talk about that's kind of been interesting is this idea of a crowdsourced project. Now, if you've heard of this term crowdsourcing, basically means that you kind of have a task to do and you put it on the internet, and then a lot of people help out to make that. So one of the crowdsourced projects is a film called Iron Sky, and it was what they did for this film is, they kind of shot it like a normal film, but they had a bunch of tasks that needed to be done to complete the film. So they had a website. You could go onto the website and you could go and see what needed to be done. And if you had those skills, you could go and do it, and then you could submit that content. And so all these people came together to make this film, Iron Sky, so it was created through the talents of over 2,000 members. So if we can collaborate on these projects, it allows us to become involved in the filmmaking process. Now, this is not a big budget Hollywood film, but that's kind of exactly the point, is that we can make these films that have relatively high production values through the help of a bunch of people with little cost. Another pretty interesting project is a project called Star Wars Uncut, and let me just open this up really quick. And this is a pretty interesting project, and what they did is they cut the original Star Wars movie into 15-second clips. They had people come in and say, I'll go and I'm going to remake this section of the film, this 15 seconds. And then what they did was they strung it together. So if you go and watch this film, you can actually watch the whole film kind of cut together from these different parts that people made. So it's pretty interesting in terms of being a movie. And it looks like they are doing The Empire Strikes Back next. So crowdsourcing to make these new projects. Now, this is definitely not probably for everybody. It's not necessarily what you're going to want to sit down on a Friday night and watch. But it shows that the way that fans are now able to interact with the content, movie content, is changing that relationship that fans have, or audiences have, with the movies that they watch. Okay? So the films that I chose this week, they kind of represent different approaches to this new media landscape that we have. So as you watch it, I want you to think about, how does this represent kind of the future of film production, and how do you feel about that? So hope you guys enjoy the films for this week, and I will see you all later.